This is an enterprise network switch, the Arista DCS7010T-48. 48 ports, 4 uplinks. It was in a data center somewhere before, God knows where, but now it's on my desk. Paid roughly about £120 for it, not bad. Before this video, I never stopped to think about what actually goes inside one of these things and how they actually operated. I essentially assumed it was a basic circuit board with loads of ports bolted onto it. Could not fathom, and I had no idea actually how much goes into this, so both assumptions turned out to be wrong, so let's get on with it. Before I begin to crack it open, it is worth understanding what is on the outside, because the front panel of an enterprise switch is more interesting than it first looks. The 48 RJ45 ports and the small form factor plus ports are the data plane, the thing the switch is actually here to do. These ports carry your network traffic, but then there are 3 ports near the rear side that serve a completely different purpose. The marked port, the IOIOI, is a serial console port. It looks like an Ethernet port, but it is not. Its role is it uses a completely different pin output and speaks to the RS-232 serial communication standard form based in the 1960s. You need a specific rollover cable to use it, and it gives you direct access to the switch operating system regardless of any network configuration. This is your emergency tool essentially, your recovery tool, and it turns out is also the only way to set a brand new switch for the first time. The marked port with the arrow symbol is the out-of-bound management port. The Ethernet port, a dedicated network interface port just for administrating the switch, completely separate from the 48 data plane ports. And the USB port is just not for input devices, it is used to set up ZTP provisioning and image transfers, which I will be explaining momentarily. At the rear you have 2 power supply bays and a single tray fan. The tray fan is hot swappable, meaning you can pull it out and replace it without losing a single packet. The first thing, which was immediately different from any consumer switch, is you find at the rear the 2 power supply units, and both of them are active simultaneously, sharing the load. If one fails, the other takes the full load without the switch ever losing power. Unfortunately, these PCUs are not hot swappable, unfortunately, and therefore cannot be replaced. Each PSU is rated to a maximum of 75 watts. The switch draws about 52 watts typically across both, which is under a per watt port for about 48 ports of gigabit Ethernet. That efficiency is one of the things that makes this so good. Now moving on to the fan tray. One single module, 2 fans inside it. The interesting detail design here is that the fan tray is reversible. You can physically flip it to change the direction the airflow moves through the switch. This one is front to rear, meaning the air enters through the port side and exits out the back. In data center, this matters because the racks are organized in hot aisles and cold aisles. Cold air comes in the front of the rack and gets pulled through the equipment, and hot exhaust exits the rear. If your switch had a fixed airflow in the wrong direction, it would fight the entire thermal design of the data center. Also notice there are 2 fans in this one tray. If one fails, the other would keep running. The same philosophy applies with the dual PSUs. Single points of failure are systematically removed from the design at entry level. Now open up the chassis, we see the main board, and this is where my assumption of what a switch actually looks like completely fell apart. There is a chip in this board that dwarfs everything around it. This is a switching ASIC, the Application Specific Integrated Circuit. It is a chip designed to do exactly one thing, and to do that one thing faster than any general purpose processor could ever do. In this case, that one thing is forwarding Ethernet packets from one port to another. When a packet arrives on one of those 48 ports, the ASIC looks up the destination MAC address in the table of 84,000 entries, decides which port to send it out to, and does that in nanoseconds. All 48 ports simultaneously at line rate. The 710 can forward up to 132 million packets per second, and this single chip is responsible for all of that. This is the Broadcom Merchant Silicon, meaning the Arista does not design this chip themselves. They license the Broadcom. Almost every enterprise switch vendor does the same thing. The differentiation between these vendors is where the software runs on top of it, why the EOS matters, and why specifically I wanted the Arista over alternatives. There are 2 chips on this board, but the heat sinks are not removable without damaging the circuit, so I cannot show them to you directly. But what I can tell you is one of them has to be a multi-core 86 processor, and the other one is a 4GB DRAM, the same RAM you would find in your old laptop. I'll show you what these chips do in a moment when we brought into the US, because that is where their existence becomes genuinely surprising. So here's where things actually got generally interesting, because getting into this switch for the first time was not as simple as plugging the cable in and open a browser. When you first power on a factory first Arista switch, it boosts into something called Zero Touch Provisioning Mode, ZTP for short. The switch has no startup configuration, so it immediately starts broadcasting DCHP requests onto whatever is connected to it, looking for a provisioning server that will hand it configuration automatically. In a real data center with hundreds of switches, this is generally useful. You pre-stage configs on a server and the switch configures itself without human intervention. However, in a home lab environment, it's just another obstacle. So the first thing I tried was plugging my desktop directly into the management switch port using Wireshark to see what the switch was advertising. And this is what I saw. LLDP packets from an Arista MAC address announcing the switch's presence on the network, and repeated DCHP discovery packets from a source address 0.0.0. This is standard behavior for devices no IP address yet. The switch was broadcasting into nothing because my desktop had no DCHP server running at all. So I ran DNS-Q on my desktop as a temporarily DCHP server, and the switch picked up an address. So I could see my ARP table at 192.168.100.105, but SSH still refused the connection. This is because in ZTP mode, the switch has not yet set up SSH. It is not accepting connections until there's a configuration. This is the moment the console cable became unavoidable. The console port is the only access method that works regardless of software state. It is a direct hardware connection to the CPU, so I connected it. I opened Minicom at 9600 band and got the EOS prompt. First thing I saw was ZTP message explaining what was happening and how to stop it. I typed zero touch disable, the switch reloaded and a clean EOS session started, and I was in. Once I was in the EOS prompt, the first thing to understand is that privilege mode. The left-hand prompt is the user mode, read-only, very limited, and the hashtag prompt after typing enable is the privilege mode, full access essentially. A configuration drops you in configuration mode. This is where you can directly make changes. Left-hand sign versus the hashtag is the distinction that catches everyone out first. The configuration I applied was hostname and a management IP address. The management port on Arista lives in a completely separate routing table called VRF, Virtual Routing Unfolding Instance, which is why you have to create your own VRF instance management and reference it explicitly in the default route. This VRF separatation is intentional. Management traffic can never accidentally bleed into your data network. But then I ran into an architecturally important question. The management port is designed for out-of-bound management. It is your emergency recovery interface, completely separate from your data network. Using it as a normal data portal is wrong practice. The correct approach is a switch virtual interface. It gives the switch a reachable IP address to its own network data ports. A SIV is a layer 3 logical interface being associated with a VLAN. When you configure an interface, VLAN 1 with an IP address, the switch becomes reachable at that address through any data port on the VLAN 1 without the management port being connected to anything at all. This is an in-band management through the data plane, and it's the architecturally correct way to reach the switch day to day. The management port goes back to what it's been designed for, an out-of-bound emergency access path that only comes out if somehow you break your data plane and lock yourself out, which for the record, I also managed to do it at least once during this process. So let me show you what we actually have at the end of all this. Show interface status gives you the complete picture of the data plane. Every physical port, its link state, its speed, and which VLAN it is assigned to. ET1 is the router uplink, ET2 is the desktop, ET3 is a home lab server, all connected, all forwarding traffic, all on VLAN 1. Show version tells you everything you need to know about the control plane, the EOS version, the model, the serial number, and crucially the system RAM. This being just under 4 GB. On the switch, that is a multi-core x86 architecture CPU, and its DRAM that I mentioned earlier is now visible as its real number rather than a speck on the sheet. And then if you type bash in the EOS prompt, you get a Linux shell, a full bash shell on a network switch. Because EOS is not a proprietary operating system pretending to be in Linux, it's actually Linux with an EOS running on top of it, a set of processors. Everything you can do on Linux you can do here. This is why Arista switches are generally programmable in a way that older Cisco equipment simply cannot do. The switch is now fully operational. Router on ET1, desktop on ET2, home server on ET3. Reachable via SSH through its own data plane. Management port unplugged, sitting in a drawer, available if ever needed in emergency cases. Source and Titan Enterprise Switch. Two completely separate systems share one chassis. The data plane, a single purpose-built ASIC processor that does nothing but accept forward packets at speeds that would embarrass any general purpose processor, handling all 48 ports simultaneously at a line rate. And the control plane, a full Linux computer running x86 CPU with 4GB of RAM, but EOS runs, routing protocols, and a bash shell which waits if you need it. Two systems are deliberately isolated from each other. The ASIC does not think, the CPU does not forward packets, each does what it's built for. And how do you get into one for the first time? Well, with a console cable, of course, a terminal emulator at 9600 bandwidth, and about 20 minutes of discovering that CTP mode existed. That your desktop has no DHCP server, and that Wireshark is generally a useful tool for understanding what a device is saying when it arrives on your desk.